Discouragement is the most dangerous temptation that the enemy of men's salvation can offer. In other temptations, he only attacks a particular virtue and shows himself openly. In discouragement, he attacks them all and hides. In other temptations, the trap is easily seen. In the learned doctrine, often in our own reason and in the education we have received, we find feelings that condemn them. In the face of evil that we cannot disguise, conscience and moral principles awaken and serve as support for us to sustain ourselves. In discouragement, we find no help. We feel that reason alone is not enough to practice all the good that God asks. On the other hand, we no longer expect to find with Him the necessary protection to resist passions. We find ourselves, therefore, without courage, ready to abandon everything, and that is where the demon wants to lead the discouraged soul. In other temptations, we clearly see the evil of adhering to them through reasoned feeling. In discouragement, disguised under many forms, we believe we have the most solid reasons to let ourselves be guided by this feeling, which we may not even consider as a temptation. However, this feeling ends up convincing us that the constant practice of virtues is impossible and exposes the soul to being overcome by all passions. It is therefore important to avoid this trap. The great harm suffered by a discouraged soul is that, deluded by an excessive fear that disguises its true principles, beaten down by the sight of difficulties against which it finds no resource within itself, it does not consider this state as a temptation. If it were to face it from this point of view, it would mistrust the reasons that feed it and thus would come out of it much sooner and more easily. It is quite certain, however, that it is a well-defined temptation, because every feeling that is opposed to the law of God, whether in itself or by the consequences it may have, is obviously a temptation. This is how we judge all those that we can experience. If a thought against faith comes to us, a feeling against charity, or against any other virtue, we consider it as a temptation. We turn away from it and apply ourselves to producing acts opposed to that thought or feeling that puts us in danger of offending God. Now, hope and trust in God are as commanded as faith and the other virtues. The feeling that goes against hope is therefore as forbidden as that which goes against faith and against any other virtue. It is therefore a well-characterized temptation. The law prescribes us to frequently perform acts of faith, hope, and charity. It therefore prohibits us from any act, any reasoned feeling contrary to these precious and beneficial virtues. Therefore, discouragement must be considered as a temptation, and even as one of the most dangerous temptations, since it exposes the soul to abandon every work of piety. To become aware of this danger, it is worth examining the ordinary conduct of people. The hope of succeeding, achieving a good, avoiding an evil, in short, of satisfying some desire or passion, is what drives them to act. It is what sustains them in the pains they have to endure. It is what animates them in the obstacles they have to overcome. Take away all hope from them, and they will soon fall into inaction. Only a person who is deluded can work for something they have no hope of achieving. The same effect is produced by discouragement in the practice of virtues. It is based on the same principle, the lack of means to reach the proposed end. The soul that does not expect to succeed in practicing some virtue undertakes nothing or almost nothing to strengthen itself. The insufficient efforts it makes increase its weakness, and more than halfway conquered by its discouragement, it easily allows itself to be dragged into the passion that dominates it. The sight of its weakness first throws it into indecision, into turmoil. In this state, entirely occupied with the difficulty it feels in fighting, it no longer sees the principles that should guide it. The fear of not succeeding prevents it from seeing the means that God presents to it and that it must adopt to overcome. It surrenders, therefore, defenseless to the enemy. It is like a child whom the sight of a giant advancing against it makes tremble, and who does not think that a stone is enough to bring him down if she uses that stone in the name of the Lord. This soul, thus discouraged, forgets that it has powerful assistance in the kindness of the most tender Father, and that it is enough to call for this assistance to emerge victorious from the battle.